that's something that was built into my childhood, that there was opportunities to be creative in all ways all the time. And as an adult, you need to make room and space for it in a way that it's not as programmed and structured into your life. And that's something I'm working on.
That would be my wish for something to come next, is to be able to successfully find more time to work on little creative projects in that way.
Because we love collaborating, and we do it a lot.
Hello, my name is
Celine Perez, and you are listening to Are You an Artist?
As you can hear, today's episode is with Tooley and Hamish Hutchison-Poyntz, and it's about feminist refusal, climate crisis games, and Halloween. I really enjoyed this conversation with Hamish and Mary, so I hope that you enjoy it too. Have a good time! So I'm going to start by reading out your letter.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much for being here, both of you. It's the first episode with 3 people.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Exciting.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So the letter is for you, of course, but also to describe you to the listeners. If I say something wrong, or if I miss something, please be like, hey, this is wrong information.
This is wrong information.
I haven't
It's all
started.
lies.
It's all lies. What is the truth anyway?
Exactly.
Dear Mary and Hamish, thank you so much for coming to London all the way from Canada, because it's always a gift to see your big smiles and energy on a rainy London day, even though today is sunny. So. I both know you from working at Wilton's Music Hall, but I did a bit of research about your careers. I found your bios on the Young Vic Creators Program.
No.
Mary, you are a producer, performer, facilitator, researcher, and theatre maker. What I didn't know is that you trained as a musical theatre performer, Shakespearean actress, and clown, focusing on strengthening muscles for feminist refusal. I want to know more about this. Hamish, you describe yourself on Instagram as a theatre nerd and chaotic, neutral dumbass.
Wait, really?
God, I forgot that's my bio on there.
On
It's so many
Instagram?
years old. I love it.
You are a theatre and audio artist interested in games, performance, the climate crisis, and audio storytelling. You also work as a freelance podcast editor and producer, and in your spare time, you review and write about theatre around London for todolist.com. My first question is, how do you find the time to do all of this? But we must start with the first question of this podcast, which is, are you an artist?
Yes.
Yes.
I would say yes, definitely. What kind of artist is probably a more complicated question, because I feel like, certainly for me, that tends to change a lot on the moment depending on what kind of work I can get access to and what kinds of things are around and what kinds of people are around. But yes, I would call myself an artist. Mary, what do you think?
I think the industry is really challenging to break into. So I've had lots of moments of self-doubt around that, especially as I've gotten older and graduated from university and then our master's program. And the various difficulties of that have made me question whether I'm an artist. But I think because we keep holding strong onto that idea and we are pretty resilient and determined to find our way as artists and not give up on that, that somewhere I've got to believe I'm still an artist.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're definitely an artist, given all the things you do. But I also think that's a really good way of summarizing the challenges of being it.
And do you remember how you fell into theatre? That you were like, I want to work in theatre.
I'm trying to think of the exact moment because I always loved theater. I mean, my parents took me to the theater growing up, and I remember there's a great sort of Canadian Shakespeare theater festival near our home, and my parents would always take us on family trips to see musicals.
Yeah.
And my uncle didn't want to see a production of Cabaret, and I was only 7, and there wasn't a ticket for me because I was pretty young, and that's quite like a dark and raunchy musical. But my mom goes, Mary can handle it. Let's throw her in that empty seat. Like, we can't let that seat go to waste. And I think I got really dressed up for it. I think I even had a pair of little heels on.
What?
And got into I probably had my mom's lipstick on, sat there, and I just remember this image of someone swinging out on a swing, and a woman, her breasts were exposed, and all she had covering her nipples were little like golden stars. And I remember thinking, what is going on? I love this, but I thought I shouldn't love this. So I was like kind of covering my fingers over my eyes, but peering through at the stage going, this is the most magical experience, but being like, ooh, this is the worst, and making my parents really uncomfortable. And then as soon as we got home, I went into the basement and got on our computer and started watching the movie version and learning every song and singing every song. And my mom went, she's hooked. Like, she's such a drama queen, pretending she doesn't like this, thinking, oh, it's too inappropriate for me. And I'm in the basement acting out all the songs. And yeah.
Wow.
So that was probably an early memory of just loving theater and soaking it up and finding that escape in the music. How about you, Hamish?
Yeah, I don't know when exactly I first got interested in theater, in that I kind of remember it being around in bits and pieces here and there as a kid, but I was never really that into it. I think it really took until I was about 14, 15 or so kind of thing in high school, when my high school had a really big theater program that they'd kind of set up and were running. And a couple of friends of mine had done some backstage stuff with it the year before. They announced that they were doing auditions for a junior grades show for just the kind of grades 8 to 10s for the first time. And so basically then a bunch of them were going, well, we'll audition for it, see how it goes. And I was kind of like, sure, I'll do some fun thing with my friends. They seem to enjoy this. This sounds like a good idea. And ended up auditioning for... It was a version of a Christopher Marlowe play called Dido, Queen of Carthage. It's okay as a play, honestly. Don't go running out to read it, but managed to get in and got in and started doing it with my friends, and from there kind of just got pulled into it. I think mainly up until that point I'd struggled a little bit to find a new community in that high school because it was a different group of people than I'd kind of grown up around. And so really found a sense of community and a sense of belonging as part of that. And then from that was ooh, this is really fun. I really enjoy being in the middle of this, and I really enjoy being around these people in this kind of environment and this kind of community. And so got sucked in and kind of just kept going from there.
Wow. Yeah, I guess theater can be quite playful, like a playground, Even when you're adults, you can finally play again.
I mean, that's what's so fun about it, is it's such a great space to play and to experiment and just kind of mess around without, for all that people talk about there being, big stakes and big drama behind stuff, ultimately, it's a little bit of a space to pretend and just kind of play without huge stakes and huge consequences for every action. It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a good place to have fun and to be with other people.
Yeah, that's so true. I was a total Barbie girl as well as a kid, and I had a kingdom of Barbies in my basement that my neighbor and I called Bridgetown, and there was a little Barbie schoolroom and bakery and many houses that we made with tissue boxes, and anything we could find in the house we'd steal from cupboards. My dad, things would go missing in our house because I'd put them in the Barbie houses, and I'd play for hours. So I think this is an extension of that, just wanting to continue that play.
Yeah.
And be in a space with people where we're really connecting and opening up, and we get to experience vulnerability together and all the different emotions that you don't always feel you're allowed to express in everyday life. Getting to express that in a safe and free space, as you were kind of saying, without the real world consequences
Totally.
or judgments. Yeah.
What is feminist refusal?
So, where do I even begin?
Just a brief summary, because I haven't come across that term.
Yes, so, you digging? So, feminist refusal is a practice of learning to say no in society to things that, especially as women, we're told not to say no to. So, for me, I created a practice of building muscles, we're rebuilding muscles of being able to say no, because as young children, we're really capable of sharing how we feel and being really on the nose about that. And then we begin to unlearn those natural skills as we feel pressures to fit into sort of boxes or the perceptions of others. And so the expectations of others. Mm. So I wanted to create these workshop spaces of all women, all identifying women, where we could play with what it means to say no, how to say no, and learn that together. I don't have like a prescribed pedagogy for it. I'm just want to get into the space and be playful and experience joy together and anger and all the emotions that as women it feels we're not always allowed to express fully.
Crazy that you're coming from like playing with the Barbies and stuff into like really that stuff where you want to shift that, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's like bringing that playfulness into an adult space where we're actually really connecting.
Women, different and
Yes, totally.
That's beautiful.
So I found that was part of my dissertation work, and I just kind of have continued to cling on to it because when I gather with women in a space, they teach me so much about their own experiences of hardship and struggle and working through that to become their true authentic selves. And at the end of it, you're not left ever feeling sort of weighted down by the issues we face, but it tends to be an empowering experience. Mm-mm. And that's pretty exciting.
Wow.
For me.
I just want to add too that like the women you've worked with in these workshops absolutely rave about them and like totally love them. And I would say learn a lot from you too and from all the like research and expertise that you bring to the process. It's really incredible stuff.
Thanks. I mean, we have really difficult conversations and conversations that we don't have answers to and we just leave them out in the space. Yeah. It's just like...
But that's so important, I think, as well, because these days you are so pressured to have a strong opinion about everything, to know like what you think. Mm. And sometimes I don't know what I think and I need to just... throw something out.
Yes.
And allow it to just be.
Well, I certainly felt that in our master's program. There felt like a real need and pressure to have answers, to have formulated, complex, thoughtful responses that you could deliver in an instant.
Yeah. What?
And I never could. I thought, this is all new material to me. This is new vocabulary. There's new ideas. I need time to work through these. I need to walk and let them sort of find their way to me, and I can't respond really quickly. And I think that's part of this process. Is also like feminist refusal is about resisting the urge to act quickly. You can be slow and thoughtful, and you don't need to have an answer. Yeah. It can just be about also a space where you can just say something and there aren't consequences. We can have open minds about that and let things sit. Mm. If we create a space of care, of reciprocal care, where we look after each other, where there are rules in the space. When you create etiquette for the space and rules, people feel free because they know how they can behave, what parts of themselves they can give, and how to give the parts of themselves they want to in a safe way, where everybody has engaged in the same rules.
Yeah, that is... Yes,
that's a big part of it.
So beautiful to create that space where people can be vulnerable and like,
Yeah.
Wow.
And
And you, Hamish, I didn't know that you also were working around climate crisis and games around that and all. How did you go into that?
I mean...
You looked at the weather.
Looked outside and went...
It was winter a week ago.
Why is it this hot in the middle of September?
I mean, like, we joke, but that is kind of some of the origin of it is, I mean, part of my own interest in climate crisis and in responses to it is because obviously it's a general thing that we all experience, but I think especially as a teenager, I started to notice it more and more as a personal thing in my own life, literally just through the fact that if you live in Vancouver these days, there's now, which wasn't true when I was a little kid, about a week or two every year where the whole city will just become shrouded in wildfire smoke because the fires have gotten steadily worse and worse and worse
Oh, wow.
every year because of climate change and because of rising temperatures and greater deforestation and changing weather patterns and all that stuff. And so I think, like, for a long time, it's been just sort of a personal thing that I've noticed in my life and that affects me and that affects people that I care about. And so I've wanted ways to try to engage with that, which usually is then through theater in some ways. And then also a big part of it came out of, I would try to have conversations about this with people, especially in undergrad and in university, and found myself running into and lots of my friends running into just a thing of people not really being able to talk about climate change because it's just too big. It's such a big topic and such a weighty topic and feels so overwhelming to try to confront that, certainly for me, and I think for lots and lots of people, especially lots of people of our generation, it's hard to talk about it without becoming kind of immobilized and without just sort of freezing up in the face of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to try to find a way through theater to help people kind of work through that and find sort of ways to make it something that they could start to think about and talk about, and something that I could start to think about and talk about usefully. And the other side of this is the games side of it, which I love games of any kind, especially board games, card games, tabletop role-playing games. I grew up playing a lot of all of those with my family, with my friends, especially in university and especially during the pandemic. Spent a lot of time playing lots of card games, lots of board games, lots of role-playing games with the friends of mine that I was living with at the time. And so those are just, I find, something that I really enjoy. And then as I've gotten more into them, also something that I find can be a really good way to open up conversations for people. Games, sort of like you were talking about, Mary, games can be really helpful to give people a kind of set of rules and a framework for having a conversation where they don't immediately have to engage with every part of it, and they can take a little bit of the pressure off and a little bit of the stakes off, but they have a way in. It's not just sit down at a table with a bunch of strangers or people you sort of know, have a deep, in-depth conversation about climate change. That's really hard to do.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of work to figure out where you start with.
Yeah.
If you can give people a game, you can give them a set of actions that they can take to start having that conversation, and a set of sort of rules isn't quite the right word as much as guidelines and structures that they can kind of use to move that conversation along, while also, if you're doing it well, hopefully having some fun with it and getting some joy out of it and getting to engage with a big topic like climate crisis in a way that isn't just, oh God, everything's terrible, that can also have moments of fun or have moments of hope or have moments of joy mixed in with that, and in acknowledgement of also everything that's hard about it. So basically it kind of came together in the dissertation project that I then did for my master's, which was putting together a show called Heat, which was essentially a kind of very theatrical tabletop role-playing game with some drawing and some kind of crafting objects out of construction paper, where people would play as characters in kind of London 50 years from now, trying to figure out how to survive a heat wave and going around that near future London.
It's amazing,
to then,
this piece.
like, learn from other strategies that other communities have used to try to find strategies to bring back to their own little community and come up with a little story in the process of that. And then, pull the little twist on them at the end that, hey, all these strategies actually exist and you can go find them in your own community and around London. and in doing so, trying to give people through that sort of game theater thing a way to engage with climate change in their own lives and at kind of the scale of their own sort of communities that they're part of without just becoming immediately overwhelmed by it. So hoping to do more with that. I know I managed to put on another version of that at the Peopling the Palaces festival back in the spring, and now trying to figure out what the next version of that will be. I realize that was a long-winded answer. Sorry for rambling.
Just to say that if the show is totally beautiful, like he's designed it in this really intelligent and complex way. But as someone who's very afraid of games because all of the rules really overwhelm me and I didn't grow up with Dungeons and Dragons.
That, actually, I don't do games very much and my memory is a bit like short-term memories.
I struggle with this too. Yeah. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can play this because it sounds too complex for me and I've had too many moments in my life of being sort of feeling not intelligent enough to figure them out. So, however, I went into the room and played with a bunch of our friends and you for your first iteration of it, and it was so accessible and so fun, and we actually just laughed the whole time. I mean, it actually made you feel hopeful at the end, and it was really beautifully designed. That the rules, they get more complicated in a very gradual way that you feel like you can get a handle on each part of it, and it's not too overwhelming. And I think
that's clever.
That's a really incredible feat that he's accomplished, because most games I'm like, oh gosh, there's a 12-sided die and a 7-sided die.
Actually, I feel like it's a bit theater. You need to also make it accessible.
Yes.
Like, don't just go into like language that people don't understand because it's like clever or...
Absolutely.
No?
Yeah, don't bullshit people with your big language. Absolutely.
Don't be like, yes, look at me, I'm so smart, I have all the large words. I have done that before. I've been guilty of it, but I also really try not to do that these days because it's not a good way to actually engage with people. You can't have a conversation that way. If you want to have an actual conversation with people, which to me feels like the point of any kind of theater thing and that sort of thing of bringing people together, you need to do it in a way that like everybody's participating in equally.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So you work a lot together.
We do.
And you live together?
We do. In one room.
How?
1.5 rooms. I count the kitchen as half.
Debatable. Without a door. An archway.
How do you manage that?
Oh my. A lot of communication. We're just always talking. I never stop talking. Even when I'm doing yoga, I'm talking to, hello, Hamish, what's going on over there?
No, but I think that's it. It is a lot of conversations and a lot of just kind of continually checking in with each other and trying to be really clear and really upfront about where each of us are at and what we each need and what we can kind of each give each other in that moment, and just sort of checking in and figuring it out. I don't know. Do you think that sounds fair?
That's it. I mean, when you just live in one room together, you really learn to read each other. And so even if I'm in a space where I'm even maybe unaware of what I'm feeling and I'm holding back, he can recognize that, and I can recognize his body language, and we just dive into the hard conversations always, because as soon as we do that, something is solved almost immediately.
It always makes it clearer to try to jump in right away as opposed to letting anything sit and build up.
And we have a lot of fun. I think we're kind of goofballs at home and pretty silly, and we love to just go around being different characters and being, strange and creating little imaginary worlds for ourselves, as silly as that sounds.
Strange animal noises at various points, just kind of shouted out with no reason behind them.
We have a lot of fun.
And it's funny because you both have like a kind of performance background in a way.
Yeah.
And how did you go from that also into more like directing, production, and...
Well, we met working together. Yes. So we really met being research assistants for a drama professor back home in Canada.
Technically, we'd met before that online and did not really like each other
No.
at the time. Kind of hated each other.
Oh, yes.
I was working for an admittedly shitty and dysfunctional drama student government. you were lead producing a theater company semi-attached to that student government, that they were not getting along.
There was
and this did not
animosity
help us
between these teams, and
Oh wow.
set up for a good relationship between each other.
no, and so but we only knew each other online. So through COVID, so it was only through Zoom calls that we yeah. It wasn't until we met in person doing research together that I saw him go into our professor's backyard, and I thought, my heart just, oh my gosh, I like this guy. I shouldn't. I told everyone I hate him. I've got to hate him. I can't be wrong on this. So I fought.
I think I had a very similar shit moment. Sorry if we can't swear.
No, you can swear in this. You can do whatever you want. Speak about anything.
Yeah. So
Sorry, what was the question again?
So-
I've
yeah,
totally
what was the
forgotten.
question?
So how did you go from more like performing, in training, and then more to directing, producing
Oh.
stuff?
Oh,
Hmm.
I think so far for me, leaving a research-based background in our masters, it was almost easier to slide into producer work. Something about that research skill set led into producer work quite easily. And actually finding the performance work is more challenging. The work that I think probably fulfills me on a deeper level, on a more creative level, the work that I'm seeking out is difficult to find where we're at in this sort of space as producers. I really love that producer role because it asks you to think analytically and to be incredibly organized and to work with a lot of different people and to build something collaboratively. But the creative work is the work that comes from your gut and your heart and is definitely more what just makes me feel alive and awake. So that's the work that I find hard to find right now that I'm looking for. But it's actually almost easier for me to get the other work. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
How about for you, Hamish?
I mean, I think I've had parts of that for sure, and also parts that are slightly opposite, in that definitely, similarly, coming out of the Masters, it's been a lot easier to find a way into doing the producing work as opposed to other kinds of artistic work, just because that's what people are looking for in an easy way from emerging creatives who don't have as many kind of connections or network built up. I think too, for me, a part of it is I really enjoyed performing and acting when I kind of first got into theater as a teenager. But as I kind of started to get into doing it more in university and in undergrad and stuff, I started to kind of find that I liked doing the sort of back end of the directing and the writing and bits of producing stuff and being involved in that capacity more, mainly because it felt for me almost like I got to think about it more and analyze it a bit more and kind of think about the way I could fit different parts together. Partly, I like a good puzzle. I like anything that I can turn into a puzzle, and that felt a lot more like it for me. And so I think I ended up finding having a bit more of that thinking side to it fit who I am as a person a little bit better, or at least felt more interesting at the time to me. And I think still does a little bit when it comes to the parts of creating that I find most interesting. I think too, yeah, and then a big part of it is also just what work is easiest to get access to. Mix of things.
How about you, Eileen?
What was my question?
It's about sort of balancing the different kinds of work. For us, it was the producing and directing versus the creative work.
Yeah.
But you balance a lot of work.
Yeah, I think I need to... Maybe I need to have both. I need to create a bit of stuff, which I do with this podcast or with other things. But I also need to, like when I do life modeling, I'm just there for people to be able to work, for people to be able to draw. Or same when I feel like it's stupid, but very useful when I work as a background for movies also because, I'm just a shadow in the background, but I make the thing real for people, you know.
Right.
And I kind of like to be just a part of the puzzle sometimes as well, and be told what to do and just get into a character also. I love that. Because I feel like we like to try to fix an identity, but we are all so multiple in a way.
Definitely.
And it's just it's so nice when you can explore that in just being other people. It's like,
Yes.
So yeah, maybe I would love to go into acting at some point. Or
Absolutely. I think there's something interesting about doing that kind of extra work too, and being able to create that full character in your own space and without the same kind of focus and pressure that you might have in sort of a lead or supporting role.
Of course, yeah.
There's something beautiful and free about this is all mine, and there's not too much pressure, because that's part of also what I like about our lives right now is that there's some jobs where the pressure is on. We've got to be leading this project, producing it, bringing people together, getting butts in seats. It's really intense.
Yeah.
And getting butts in seats.
Yeah.
Where are the butts?
Where are the butts?
Sometimes quite literally dragging them into the room, being like, no, you, sit here.
Off the street, being like, you want to see this
Come see
weird,
our
wacky
free thing."
workshop? Get your ass in here. And then there's also the joy of just showing up at Wilton's, like the greatest community of artsy people,
Honestly.
and just being in that space without the pressure to perform, without the pressure to prepare.
Yeah.
You just show up, and there's such a beauty to just existing in that space.
Exactly. I
And
love
turning
that.
off my brain and turning off that side of me that just is always like, you've got to do this and this and this and be busy and productive. I just love being there.
No, it's
To
great.
balance
just
it.
getting to be in a routine and around good people, and just to to be able to turn off that sort of analytical planning things outside of the brain.
Yeah.
Feels good sometimes. It's good to have that balance.
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation of like a piece or something that you've seen recently, or a writer or anyone?
Well, I'll just say that when we got back to London after a sort of long trip home to Canada, one of the first shows we saw was on the West End. It was a production of the musical Hello, Dolly, which is a Golden Age musical.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes a big musical in a really huge theater that's a very commercial piece can feel a little soulless, like they're just kind of going through the motions. And this piece was just full of heart, and I hadn't seen a musical piece on the stage that just uplifted me like that. It was totally joyful. It's about an older woman finding her purpose after she's lost her husband, finding her career and her place in society and rebuilding herself. And you don't often see pieces about older women as the center focus point.
Yes.
And seeing them thrive and seeing them idolized and worshipped and admired by all of these people. So there's this big number where she comes down a staircase and she's in this big gorgeous dress, and she's a woman in her 60s, and there's men being like, hello, Dolly, we love you. Oh, we've missed you. I mean, it's so great to see a woman of that age in her power, and to think, life can only get more full. We're not losing anything as we go forward in it.
Yeah.
We can change and ebb and flow, and we can find different sides of ourselves and grow into different parts of ourselves as we get older. I don't know. I just found it so inspiring, and I just loved it. The music was gorgeous. It's really beautiful.
A beautiful show. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a really beautiful one. I think that's a fantastic one. I think I also wanted to shout out, I don't know if it's still being performed anywhere or what kind of its current performance iteration is, but one that we saw back in the spring, which was called 1884.
Oh, yes.
Which I had to look up the exact date of because I always forget the exact number, but it's 1884. It's a show by, I believe, Rhianna Ilube is the main author's name, and then in partnership with a company called Coney, and it's a game/show, so you can see why I like it.
Uh-huh.
But it's essentially you're brought together with a table full of strangers to help create a household in this new kind of development that's opened up, and you get to, together kind of come up with what your house knock is and what your kind of house traditions are and what your sort of like community around with some of the other tables of houses looks like, and all those kinds of things. And you start building this really organic little community with the people around your table that really feels like yours. And then, like, some of your furniture gets taken away, and then your house knock gets standardized by the people in charge, and then the community events get canceled, and then one of the members of your table gets transferred to a different table, and essentially the whole thing was done as something that I didn't know about, but was apparently a massive colonial conference held, I think, in Germany in 1884, which was essentially the various European colonial powers coming together to plan the colonization and colonial division of Africa. And so they essentially created this show as a reflection on that and as a way to use that kind of game process to give people a sense of what it would be like to have somebody come in and, in a very, like, much lower stakes way, take apart that kind of organic community and sense of self that you and the people around you have built up together. It was a really cool, really genius show, I thought, and a really fascinating way of kind of diving into that idea, and also has an amazing Act 2 twist that I don't want to spoil, but is really, really clever and hits you in the gut in just the way that you want it to. So, if it ever comes back around, I would say, like, check it out immediately if it comes anywhere near you.
People being fed lies, how you believe you're walking into a scenario where you have total control and your freedom is just taken away slowly. You're just chips away on you, and then discussions of how we, like, preserve and talk about history and how we frame history.
It's crazy,
And through various lenses and are telling stories.
Yeah, it's quite mad. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in France, like, history is taught in a way that now I feel very ashamed, actually,
Oh, I mean,
I think it's similar. I think there's starting to be conversations about that, especially in the last 5 years or so. It feels like there's started to be conversations about how we teach history and what we kind of talk about, especially as the history of Canada. But I also feel like that's very much in its early stages, and there's a lot that gets left out or glossed over very quickly, or
certainly when we grew
really
up,
accurately talked about. Oh God,
we were
absolutely.
definitely told only the sort of pioneer French Canadian history, the history of my family, all of that sort of very white dominated.
Oh God, yeah, very much around the like
history.
And the good Europeans came over to create the country we know and love today, and nobody was hurt in the process.
So only recently are we
aware,
coming to terms with a more complicated history and bringing in more voices and perspectives into that history. So it's been really interesting to see. But I mean, that wasn't that long ago that we were learning.
Oh God, no!
That settler history is the only history.
Yeah. Or, I mean, sometimes you'd get bits and pieces of other stuff in there, but it would be, like, glossed over so quickly.
Right. Or the indigenous communities are not the main character in these stories.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We all have our own versions.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let's go into the more random questions section.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you prefer silence or small talk?
Oh, small talk. I can't handle silence. I know that about me, but I'm actually really trying to grapple with sitting in silence and not filling the space. That's also part of feminist refusal, my practice. I do not succeed. I fail at it. However, I work on it.
I think I definitely like silence more than you do.
Yes.
Although I think generally I tend to be slightly more introverted. I also think, though, probably small talk for the most part. Even if I'm not participating in it, I'm not good with like pure silence. Like even if I'm not having small talk with somebody, I like there to be a lot of chatter around and just kind of noise to listen in on. And I am very bad when that's not present.
I mean, I think with the two of us, we, even if we're not talking, we've got podcasts on,
Yes.
music.
Oh, God, yeah, constantly.
And so I know where I'm at mentally if I can find peace with silence in conversations. Like during our month away at home in Canada, I found it to be a really healing, rejuvenating time with family and friends. And I found like real peace with just listening to the waves of the lake kind of coming in and out, and being able to do yoga in silence. I mean, and just sit there with my thoughts, because my thoughts were relatively peaceful. And I've been trying to bring some of that back into London life, even though
It's hard.
it's difficult sometimes.
Do you believe in astrology?
I am definitely inclined to. I think I've got a real spiritual side, and I find it really fascinating, but I find it most fascinating in the times where I'm looking for answers and I'm looking for help.
Okay.
I think I move away from it when
It's okay.
I've found some sense of calm and love for myself. I think in the times where I'm really looking and seeking something new, I turn to it.
Whereas I think I don't believe in astrology. Sorry.
This
I
is
do
Yeah,
know-
apologize to the podcast, Hamish.
Fine, I won't. I do end up knowing a weird amount about it, if only because my dad is a really big astrology person and like will send me my horoscope monthly and sometimes weekly kind of thing. And so I think too, through you, I've found it can be a good like conversation starter with people sometimes.
Absolutely.
It can be a fun way to learn about people. But on a personal level, no, I'm sorry. I do not have any belief that the stars have any impact on my life or who I am as a person.
You know, I do enjoy like tarot cards, having a tarot card night, because for me, it's when I do it with a good friend of mine from home. She's just a beautiful like tarot card reader, and it really just brings up stories in our lives that we've never shared. And has that ever resonated? And we'll laugh when it doesn't. And then sometimes it will bring up something that we just had no idea we shared, or something really interesting from her past that she hasn't thought about in years, or whatever that is. It can build some real connection, as you were saying, as a
it's a bit like a
conversation
game in a
starter.
way.
It's a game,
Yeah,
totally.
that you can discover yourself through that.
Yes.
Yeah.
How about you, Aline?
I don't really believe in astrology,
Yeah.
but for me it makes sense, with the signs that, of course, like if you're born in June, you're gonna be probably a certain type of person compared to if you're born in January. Because if you're born in cold winter, like your first perception of what's around in the world is completely different than when you're born in. I don't know. I feel like it depends also where you live, but of course it makes sense that there may be certain types of people who, yeah.
I've never thought about it that way, but that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah,
It's a really
it being
interesting.
more about like the time of year that you're born in and how that
Yeah.
kind of shapes the very kind of start of who you are as a person. That's cool.
I don't know. Yeah, and
That's
also I
something to
believe
think
a bit
about.
in the, the moon and water thing, because we're made with a lot of water. And like, for example, I know a lot of people, like a lot of women have their period when it's like full moon or things like
Absolutely. And that's when hospitals often are their
Yes.
busiest.
Yeah.
I worked in a hospital one summer with my dad, and
that. Wow.
there is actually something about the full moon. I mean, that's when chaos just ensues and everybody's coming in with broken limbs.
It's always
oh my
like the
gosh.
most injuries happen on a full moon or something,
Yes.
isn't it? Yeah.
Ooh, it's getting close to Halloween, and I am in my spooky season vibes.
Can't wait for some proper Halloween time.
What do you do for Halloween?
Well, we often dress up. We dressed up as the two hobbits from Lord of the Rings
I hope
last
that
year.
you will be working at Wilton's and that you will come.
Oh, I said I'm available,
yes,
so in the Rhoda. So
Ooh la la.
Come in full costume.
that would be fun. We should, if we're all working on Halloween,
Eat
we
lots
should
of
dress up.
chocolate. I know. It's the tradition which I think I always remember about Halloween too, which I've discovered since I think is really just a Vancouver thing, is lighting off lots and lots of mildly illegal fireworks. Which in Vancouver, that is what you do on Halloween, is you get together with your friends, whatever age you are, like adults, kids, you all buy a whole bunch of fireworks and then you light them off in parks and in your backyard. and kind of light up the night that way. And I've since discovered that even in Canada, like nowhere else really seems to do this, so I don't know why it's particular to Vancouver, but it's always one of the parts of Halloween that I really enjoy and is just kind of fun.
I love that. That's definitely not something I grew up with.
If you could have dinner with one person, anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, I have so many. Julie Andrews.
Who's that?
She was Maria in The Sound of Music. And she was a big sort of, well, she's still like a performer, but musical theater performer with a beautiful sort of soprano voice. And she originated lots of sort of roles that I just loved growing up. And she's a real inspiration to me because she had this really illustrious career on the stage and in screen and musicals, and then had a really horrific sort of vocal injury that stopped her from singing. And I've had a similar injury. And so the way she's moved through that with grace and strength, and she's found sort of a second career as an author of children's books, I find her really inspiring and moving, and she perseveres in a way I really admire, and always finds a silver lining in every experience of hardship. So that's someone I think would be really touching and meaningful to sit down with her.
Oh, wow.
And joyful. Do you have someone, Hamish?
I'm trying to think, honestly. I always get stumped by this question.
Mary.
You may sit down for dinner with me, Hamish.
His wish was...
I'd like to have dinner with Mary. We'd like to have dinner with you, Aline.
Oh, yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
We'll have you to our place.
Oh, yes.
There's too many people out there to choose from.
You know, if I were you, I would choose a dead person because this wish is like so impossible. So let's use that because the alive people, maybe you will be able at some point to have dinner with them. You don't know.
Yes, totally.
Sure.
Eileen from the montage, Hamish couldn't quite find one person to have dinner with, but later he told me that he would love to have dinner with his great-grandmother from Wales, who came to London to pursue a career in acting, if I remember well. So maybe in another life, let's see. Before we finish, do you have any coming project for the future that you want to share, or any wish, any dream?
Well, I mean, I know in terms of coming projects, we don't have anything solid right now, although we're talking about with some friends, we may have a little kind of scratch night one-off performance coming up at some point in the future, so look out for that potentially.
Ooh. You will be performing as well, or?
Not sure at this point. We will see.
Okay.
It's very much in idea stage right now.
Yeah, we're just sort of organizing like a little weekend away to Hamish's cousin's stone cottage in Wales that
Very
she
good
lets
idea.
us stay in. It's just we've written all of our like dissertation there. Just it's a beautiful remote space in the woods. And so we're going to bring some friends there and do creative writing and have fires and long baths.
Wow.
It's going to be really nice, I think, to try to get the creative juices flowing and actually make time to be creative. Like, I love that about you, Aline. You find the space for the podcast and you're learning the guitar. And I think you prioritize that creative side in you and it makes you light up. It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it feels very important, actually. Yeah.
I feel like that's something was built into my childhood, that there were opportunities to be creative in all ways, all the time. And as an adult, you need to make room and space for it in a way that it's not as programmed and structured into your life. Yeah. And that's something I'm working on.
That would be my wish for something to come next, is to be able to successfully find more time to be creative in that way and to find kind of more structured time for myself and for us to work on little creative projects in that way.
'Cause we love collaborating, and we do it a lot. And so that's our dream
It's really,
right
really
now
fun.
is to write an audio drama together or something and then perform it and edit it and all that.
Wow.
That'd be nice.
That would be really fantastic.
It's a beautiful way to end. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been a joy, and I've never really done this before.
Mhm.